Okay, so here we are, hopefully streaming live on Facebook. This is our Adapting Your Novel for TV and Film panel with my fabulous group of people from earlier today. Hello, everybody. Welcome back.
Hello.
Hi.
But if you didn't see our panel earlier today, I just want to give everyone a chance to introduce yourselves. So my name is Allison Wieberdick. I will be your host today. I only started screenwriting over this past summer, but I started with adapting novels that I'd already written. My first pilot, I actually totally wrote on a whim, totally entered it in a contest on a whim, and then got special mention in the finals. So that was cool. So I have been working a little bit on adapting my own stuff, but I know we've got some people here who have been adapting other people's work as well. So Joe, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and let us know sort of your experience with adaptation or your interest in it as part of your intro.
Sure. So my name's Joe Compton. I've made 3 short films and helped about a dozen other people make their films. I've worked in film sets, a couple of which were novels that were adapted into screenplays, or source material that was adapted into a screenplay. And I worked in Hollywood for a year, and one of those projects was actually, it wasn't a novel, but it was like a short story collection, and somebody took one of the stories and made it into a feature film screenplay. And so I actually worked on revising that. I was one of the script doctors for that. So that's been my experience with it. And I'm also a novelist. I have 2 novels out. So I know, what it's about and how much, you can do and can't do as a novelist. So yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. John, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your experience?
My name is Jon Myers. I teach writing and intro to lit at Western Kentucky University. I have a BA in film from the same university, and I have an MA in English, and I will have an MFA in screenwriting by 2 months from now, 3 months from now, I think. And so today the teacher becomes a student. I am mid-adaptation. I am writing a sitcom pilot based on Bartleby the Scrivener. And if you're familiar with Upstart Crow, what Upstart Crow does with Shakespeare's life, it's my Upstart Crow of Bartleby the Scrivener. And so I do have experience with the topic. I sat in on the Career 12 screenwriting conference 2 weeks ago, last 2 weeks, and I was on in the room with Eric Heiser, who adapted Chang's short story into Arrival with Brad Riddell, and so I learned a lot for that, and that's about me.
All right.
I'm going to say different cool stuff this time, Allison. I said
Okay.
a whole bunch of different things first time. This is going to be a little different.
So
hi, my name, why not? My name is Elle-Marie Wood. I am an author, a novelist, as well as a screenwriter. I mentioned before that I have gone to school for screenwriting twice, so I'll talk a little bit about that. I have a BA in film production. BA in film production from Howard University, and I have an MA in creative writing and English from SNHU. My focus there is screenwriting. I also have an MFA in creative writing with a focus in speculative fiction from SNHU as well. I think I might have mentioned that I have the opportunity sometimes to teach students, creative writing. I teach, composition, English 1, English 101, and 102. But I've had on occasion the opportunity to teach creative writing, and I mentor a couple of people in screenwriting as well. So that's kind of fun. In terms of adaptations, I actually adapted my first novel. And I got, the really cool, this is like perfect timing because that screenplay just got accepted into as an official selection for the Nova Film and Music Festival. So I'm so excited about that, like literally yesterday. So I'm pumped about that.
Wow.
That's fantastic.
Right? So it's like perfect timing that I'm on this one today.
Excellent.
I told you different cool stuff.
Yeah.
Now I
You
have to
gotta
think of
keep,
some
you
other
gotta
cool
keep
stuff.
people on their toes, right?
Right, what am I going to say for the next one? I got to think of some other cool stuff.
I'm a Libra. I like
Right,
walks
right.
on the beach. So we did get a few questions sent in for this one. But before we get to the questions, I thought it would be good to talk about some of the more basic things about how screenplays differ from novels and short stories. So I thought maybe the good place to start would be the three-act structure and how that works for film, because there are lots of, structure things out there for writing novels as well. But one of the big things that I learned about the three-act structure with screenplays is that it does differ somewhat. So does anybody want to talk about the sort of basics of the three-act structure to get us started? No takers.
I mean, it's
Joe was a professional screenwriter screen reader for a while, so I want to hear his take from it.
Yeah, I think it's vital. I mean, it's the thing that's lifeblood for the screenwriter. It's basically what three-act structure is. Is basically there's your first act, your second act, and your third act, and they break down into, it's like 25, 50, 25, right? That's the percentages that you live by. And the first act is 25% of your story, and then 50% is the meat of the story that usually ends with something conflicting that moves you into the third act. So there's little buttons along the way that move you from one act to the other act, and you keep within that structure. So if you're doing a 90-page script, 30 of it is 30 of it is the first act, and then 40 of it is the next act, or so on. So whatever the math is, I'm not good at math, so you'll have to forgive me on that one. But that's basically what it is, and it's the construct in which film is all designed by. So the way that they make film, these acts help them figure out how to break the tone down, where to move things around, how to establish things, and it helps the actor along the way too. I mean, every aspect of this three-act structure is built upon the idea that this is a collaboration, and the collaboration has certain cogs that help the wheel move. So that's basically, I mean, it's the foundation of everything. So if your novel is a one-act structure or a mess, turning into a three-act structure becomes a nightmare for screenwriters.
To pile on top of that, we have cultural inventories of all the media that we've consumed our entire life, right? And so no matter how old you are, even if you're 18 or 19, you have a cultural inventory, and you expect a beginning, a middle, of an end. You might not know where Act 1 switches to Act 2, but if it goes on, if you're name a Marvel movie, they go from Act 1 to Act 2 at the exact right moment. If it were 20 minutes late, the audience they don't know why, but the audience gets they feel that something's off. They know when something's off.
When you take Robert McKee's story, which a lot of people will do, and it's a popular class to take, especially if you live in Los Angeles, the first thing he asks you to do is name a movie that you don't think follows the three-act structure, and he'll break it down for you how it does. I mean, every single movie that you've ever seen, linear or non-linear, a lot of people bring up Pulp Fiction. Pulp Fiction follows the three-act structure. You don't know it, but your mind, just like John said, will process it in a three-act structure, and that's just the way it works. And it's a key element of everything. And that is the number one critique of most readers when they have professional read or have coverage on their script. That's the first thing that they'll notice. If it's not three-act structure, they'll kick it back. They won't even start to break it down. They'll say, you got to fix your three-act structure first, and then resubmit it. If you're lucky. Some of them don't even let you resubmit. They just throw it in the trash, and you never know. But
Well, and the thing I want to add in is from a less technical standpoint, you kind of know it. I mean, John just made the comment about cultural inventory. You know how a story is supposed to flow. You know, regardless of all the nice fancy words we're using and technical terms and all. You know when you're reading a story like a book and you don't know what's happening, why it's happening, what the conflict is, who's doing what and why, like what their motivation is. You can tell, so when you sit down to write, you will have been trained to write in a specific way that sort of mirrors what worked for you when you were reading, right? Mm-hmm. Same holds true for watching movies. Pulp Fiction for me was not, I just don't, it's all over the place for me. And I really, I can't, when I finally get into it, I'm like, wow, but I've missed most of it. So, that's for me. Like, I am a fan of a movie like Angel Heart, and, but again, that's a lot, not for a lot of people either, right? I mean,
that's my favorite horror movie of all time, actually.
You and I both know. Oh my gosh. But
I knew there was something about you I liked.
Right? But I mean, you and I are like one of 200, I swear. People don't seem to know or like that flick, and I don't know why.
And we're probably one of 500 who've actually seen the movie. But
right? Oh my gosh. I can start quoting lines. I watch it so much. Yeah, but either way, I digress.
Sorry to get off the rails.
Right, because we could have a panel about that. I mean, Allison, that's the next one. But the point I'm making is that you know what works and what doesn't, and you know what's marketable and what's commonplace. I know you don't. You say to yourself, "Oh, I don't want to do what everyone else is doing." Yeah, but structure is not one of those things. You can be creative in other ways. It's not structure.
Yeah, I do think it's so interesting how often people are like, oh no, this is so restrictive and I'm an artiste. I don't need to do that. I'm so brilliant. I don't need to do that. But I loved the cultural inventory way of expressing it, because it's true. We do have an innate feeling about pacing and how stories should unfold. And novels they also, of course, have structure. But there is much more malleability when it comes to how much time you can spend in setup versus a movie structure. Mm-hmm. Also, too, just to throw it out there as someone interested in writing television, we for television episodes, it might be a 4 or a 5-act structure. That's a little bit different because commercial breaks are actually built in to the way that you structure a television episode. And so often, if it's a 1-hour drama, which is what I'm interested in writing, comedy terrifies me. I think I'm very funny, but I don't think I could write a comedy. But yeah, and so oftentimes with television, you've got a teaser. So that might be a couple minutes. You can maybe stretch it as long as maybe 10 minutes. Like The Americans very markedly has a very long teaser and is a fantastic show. If you've never seen it, some of the best writing I have ever seen. But yeah, so it has this teaser, and then it has 4 acts, where every once in a while you might have a teaser, and 5 acts. And so those are evenly spaced act breaks, more or less, which is where if it was airing on a network, the commercial breaks would naturally occur. And you want each act break to actually end with something that would then compel someone through the commercial break. Mm-hmm. And so the pacing of a television episode is a little bit different because you do have to contend with these interruptions. So anyone out there who's interested in television writing, definitely different things that you need to keep in mind in terms of pacing because of this. So you need to end each act, and whether or not you label the acts, this is something that seems to be somewhat in flux. That in the past you were supposed to label the acts explicitly, but like the pilot that I wrote, that I mentioned, I wrote it before I knew anything about act breaks, and so I didn't have the formal act breaks in there, and it didn't seem to be a problem. And then the next pilot that I wrote, I put the act breaks in and then took them out before I actually submit them. But it's a good way to think about it. That yeah, you have to contend with different things if you've got people sitting in a theater versus watching their television at home with these commercial breaks. Another really popular structuring thing that comes up for films would be the save the cat or some other variation on a beat sheet. So I thought that that could be a good thing for us to talk about for anybody who is new to screenwriting and is thinking about trying to adapt their novels. Talk about beat sheets. So does anybody here use Save the Cat or some other, sort of well-known beat sheet method?
So before I do my scriptment that I talked about before, right, a prose, scene by scene, I do a beat sheet. It's based on Blake Snyder's Save the Cat, but it's my own at this point because I've been doing it for so long. One thing that Lisa said last time about people that want the formatting right, and that I forget what percent you said of how many people came up through the 90s and still want that, right? Is one of the things you said, Lisa. There's still, when I started 10 years ago, 50% of the script readers were Save the Catters, right? And so if you weren't beat sheeting it that way, they were going in the garbage. And then 50% weren't, right? Now it's less because now that was Snyder's been gone for almost 10 years now, and but there's still, let's say, 25% who are Save the Catters, that because that's what they grew up on, and that's what they are. And so that gatekeeper, for everyone that badmouths Save the Cat, let's say 3 out of 10 gatekeepers might be Save the Catters. And so and
like religiously, like not
correct.
just a little bit, but like religiously. Yeah.
They open the script to page 24 to page 25. If you don't go from act 1 to act 2, they'll go back to page 24, back to page 26. And if you're not in that 3-page range, it goes in the garbage. And but that's not as true as it was 10 years ago. But getting back to what Joe said, if you're a McKee person, that they still fall into the 3 acts.
Yep.
All 15 beats still fall into the 3 acts.
I was going to say the other 50% is probably story guys, people who follow McKee's story.
Right. It's interesting that you bring that up, the beats. I mean, I was familiar with Blake Snyder's beat sheets, and I mean, see, as a novelist, I'm a pantser. And so as a screenwriter, I'm a pantser, right? I don't even know if that term even applies over here, but
it does.
I'm still that person. So all this, let's just outline. To me, I'm like, listen, I'm ready to write. Let's go. So when I get down to the outlining, and now I got to make sure I've got my beats in place, and let's label the act breaks. I'm just, and this may not, anyone who's not a pantser naturally, is cringing when I'm saying this. I'm certain of it. And I recognize it. And that can be a difficult thing to sort of fit into your screenwriting, because there are so many more rules here than there are in novels. Look, just get the thing done. If you sat there and outlined it for 5 years prior to writing it, that was your business, but here you kind of need to hit certain, and so it can be daunting to look at all the rules, if you will, and all the formatting, and let's do this, let's do that, let's do the other. And I guess my suggestion is, sure, these are the rules, right? I think the landscape may have changed a bit, especially now in the past year. The landscape is totally different. But if you take a look, one of the exercises I put myself through during the second degree, because again, I'm like, what am I doing here again, right? So for the second degree, I put myself through it, and I said, hey, let's just see how many screenwriters are actually the producers and directors. Lots. Lots. And a lot of that can be because there is such formality and structure. That's not positive nor negative. That is just statement of fact. And at this stage, I'm not saying break the rules and do what you want. I'm saying you have to know the rules, first of all. And if you're going to be successful at anything, you should know what the rules are, right? But the ability to be a little flexible with yourself in terms of how you create your final product is sort of more hidden in what you're planning to do with it and how you're going to move forward than it is in knowing all these rules and formats up front. Now, again, that's not to say you shouldn't know them. You have to know. You can't break a rule if you don't know what the rule is. So
my first
go ahead.
I was just gonna say
at Into the Script, the online screenwriting Facebook group that I'm a moderator for, whenever we survey or poll them, it's half pantsers and half planners. It might be 55 and 45, or it might be 52 and 48, but it's always half and half.
Mhm.
And what Lisa was saying, it didn't hold true about 10, 15 years ago. If you were a first-time writer and you wanted to direct, you had to have something very, very special. But because they didn't want to do that, because most studios hired directors on like 3 movie deals or 4 movie deals, and so they needed something to fill their directors with. Now they don't do that, and so, and also they realized, hey, if we let the screenwriter be the director and producer, we only have to pay him for 1 job, and he can do all 3, and we save a little money doing that. So they also realized that too. Like, I don't know why they didn't realize that anytime sooner, but yeah. But my first screenplay going back 15 years ago, yeah, I was told right away by agents and don't, you're here as a screenwriter. Tell people you're a screenwriter. Don't tell them you want to direct or produce this movie, because if they don't offer it to you, that means they just want to buy your script, and let them buy your script, because you're gonna put your name on it, and you're gonna make money. You're gonna get your Writer Guild card and all that, and then you can do what you want to do afterwards. So usually when you're pitching your first script, they said pitch the one that you're least interested in directing or producing, so that you can get your name in the door and just be a screenwriter.
Mm-hmm.
When do you think that changed, Joe?
Probably about 5-6 years ago, maybe. I think, like I said, I think they started realizing that they were saving money by hiring somebody to do 3 jobs and paying them for 1. But I mean, I'm kind of half joking, half not on that. But it's I think the lack of directors out there now, and because I also think they wanted own voices and they wanted women, and the only way to get them to produce, sell their scripts to them, was to let them produce and direct, because that was a win-win for them. And so that helped the industry bridge that gap a little bit too. So
Interesting.
I would even submit that, I don't know. I mean, I would say when streaming really started to pick up, because of all the competition and all the, content that was needed. And, sure, doing it the way that was, you just described, Joe, was the way that it had been done for however long. Now there's such more need for content that you can't fill the need. You can't fill the void. So that has been a wonderful thing for now. I mean, it's saturated. Everything's saturated. There's so much of everything, but we didn't have that 10 years ago. I would say 2006, 2007, when the whole concept of, we're not talking Blockbuster anymore, like Blockbuster, let's rent the videotape and stick it in the machine. We're not talking about that anymore. We're talking about getting it online and streaming it, when television apps, when, the apps are put on now on TV, it's totally different now. It's a whole different ballgame now.
That's a good point. Yeah, I didn't think about that.
So just to come back to the Save the Cat question, No, this was fantastic. I just wanted to make sure, because my experience with Save the Cat was actually as a novelist. And so I started out, my first novel was very much a reaction to, I had an accident, I had surgery, I was not in a good place, and this was this huge escape for me. And so I pantsed the first half and then went, I bet there's a way to do this in a structured way, because I am generally much more of a structured person. And so I read Save the Cat at that point, and so I could flag where my beats had fallen already, because I knew I was at the midpoint, and it really helped me figure out how much else needed to be done, and it helped with rewriting especially. And the second time that it was really important for me was I started out writing the Mistress of None series, as in my mind, I was going to do 12 novellas and release them once a month, and have them done before they started getting released. And then at some point, I looked at what I had as I did a NaNoWriMo, and so I finished the first novella. It wasn't complete, didn't resolve, right? And even though novellas are short, they still need to resolve. And so I was like, okay, I need this to be a novel instead. But I had the plot of novella 1 and the plot of novella 2, but that together was also not complete. And so it was figuring out how to add a subplot. and beefing up the middle of the story, where again, Save the Cat and the beat sheet was really, really helpful for me. And I found a great resource. It's on jamiegold.com, JAMIGOLD.com. She has a resources section where she has spreadsheets that you can download, and one of them is preloaded with both story from Robert McKee and Save the Cat laid on top of each other. So that's actually my tool now that I use when I am plotting a novel, is this combined tool. I mean, that being said, I then turned around and I'm looking at adapting my novels to television instead of movies, even though I was using a movie beat sheet to do it. But yeah, there actually is a Save the Cat Writes a Novel version that came out, I think, just this past October. So that does exist too for anybody who's listening, who's interested in this. It's not written by Blake Snyder. He's no longer with us, but it is written by an experienced novelist who uses the Save the Cat beat sheet method.
Isn't it his daughter? Didn't his daughter write it?
It's possible. I don't know. I just knew that it was a different writer, a woman. So on the subject of beats, one of the questions that came in had to do with, how do you know what to cut from a novel when you are adapting it? How do you make those decisions? And I feel like in a lot of ways that's a pacing question, right? Staying within this page count that you need to for a film. So I just want to sort of open that up, for people who have done adaptations. What did you cut and how did you decide?
Well,
If you can't see it, it's got to go.
Yeah, exactly.
If you can't visualize it, it's got to go.
That's exactly right. And so much of novel writing, like I've said one other time, that there's so much space. You have so much room to write and be, as descriptive as you want to be. But a lot of that doesn't translate well into film, and you can't see it. So therefore, chopping all that stuff out, and you're going to reduce so many words, so many, and you'll be surprised. I mean, I've never had to cut out an entire subplot to get it onto, but I mean, there's a lot of descriptive language that just there's no use for it in film. Film is not, for a novelist, film can be really difficult to write because it's not as rewarding. For me, I love making something come to fruition on a page, like make you visualize. If I'm just describing the color orange, that's not just orange, that's a specific shade of orange. There's so many shades of orange. And if I want you to see that shade, I have to try and describe it. And it's going to take a little while. In film, no one can. I mean, really, we're not talking about look, what is it, orange? Thank you.
Right, that's for the DP or someone else to figure out.
Right, it's not time for us to go through that. And so you will find that there's so many places you can trim that are like that it becomes easier. Sad, but easier. No one's saying it's not sad. This is adopting your book to film is not. It's a sad moment because you're going to let go of so much that you were in love with when you wrote it. Now you got to chop it up. So.
Eric Heiser, who adapted Ted Chiang's short story into Arrival, he didn't even approach it that way at all. It was not what you get rid of, it's what you keep. And there were like 5 or 6 non-negotiables, and they were all like the emotional essence of the story. And when he approached Ted Chiang to say, hey, I'm going to adapt one of your short stories, and Ted Chiang said, which one? And Eric Heiser told him, he's like, that one? But to Heiser, he felt it had this, of all of them, he thought that it had the strongest 5 or 6 emotional touchstones that really resonated with him. And that's why it became successful, because it resonated with him so much.
I bet you he visualized it, he could see it. And that's the difference, right? When you write it, when you take a novel, when you can't see it, and it doesn't help the story move forward. A lot of times with novels, you get a lot of preface, you get a lot of setup, you get a lot of origin, and all that goes. You want to get to the heart of the story and what you see as the actual story And that's when you find you can, if you start right there, you can move forward, and you'll naturally, as Lisa said, you'll naturally just start cutting stuff out because it just doesn't fit the story you're trying to tell. And that's your right as the screenwriter, is to figure out what that story is and move it forward and tell it in 90 pages as best you can, or 60 or 45, whatever you're trying to do, or in 13 episodes or whatever you're trying to do with it. You know, so it's finding that core story and just letting it, go, and everything else has got to go. And as much as you might want to hold on to how, your character picks up a rose and just hugs it and loves it and has a little tear drip down his side, all that's crap when it comes down to visualizing, because as we established through the 3-act structure, we all know what beat hits us hardest. In a Marvel movie, we know if it goes past the 30th page on the script, we're bored and you'll lose us right away. So you have to keep us going. And so to do that, you have to hit the beats that are set up in that structure. And that's telling the story that you're trying to tell. So
it's funny that you said that visually, because in the same session that I was in with Heiser, so we talked about this in the last session, but he was a final draft guy. And so his first, if you've read the script from Arrival, it's full of almost storyboard pictures, right? You can't do that in final draft. And so he spent, as he said, he's exaggerating, but he said he spent as much time embedding images into the PDF, like taking the PDF that came from final draft, and that he was saying that in a podcast interview or radio interview. And so Faden said, hey, we'll let you embed pictures in Faden, and they rewrote it so he could embed pictures into it. Now, a newbie shouldn't be embedding pictures into the screenplay everywhere, but if you're Eric Kaiser, you can, and they actually changed the software so he could do that.
Wow,
that's pretty cool.
Like, that's not going to happen for you guys. I'm just saying, but that's pretty cool.
Please don't think that's something you can do.
No.
If you get fade in, if you're a first timer, especially if you're the novelist that's adapting the screenplay, don't do that. Please don't do that.
No. And even if you were a middle experienced person, you can make a storyboard after you write the script. I mean, you don't need to do that.
Plus the studio wants to hire a guy to do that for you. So if you're selling it to a studio, let the studio hire that guy. Don't kill yourself trying to do all the jobs of 50 other people when 50 other people can do that job. That's the other thing about like a screenplay is like, you, as Lisa said, you don't want to describe the color orange because the set designer is going to have their own interpretation of what that is, and they're going to read the novel. So if they're any good, they'll read the novel and they'll have an idea of what the novelist was trying to say, and they'll put that into their own context, in their own visualization, and of course work with the director and the DP in congruency to figure out how they all want to see it and get that main vision. I mean, movies are a director's medium. A producer helps get the director to where they want to go, and so everybody else works within that context, the DP, the set designer. And so if the director doesn't see the orange as he sees it as fuchsia, it's damn fuchsia. I don't care what you write.
Yeah, and I was going to say, you can't, notice how everything that Joe's describing didn't include the screenwriter anymore. That's just, you can't be married to the color orange. Even if you wrote the novel yourself and and you said it was orange more than once, it may be green, it could be fuchsia, it could be whatever.
I think an important sort of related but slightly different to the cutting question is condensing. This is something that I found when I was, and Joe very patiently read my first screenplay, which was far too long and too flowery, and he was very patient and lovely with me about it. And I've gotten much better since then. But the freedom, I feel like if you're going to adapt, you need to unmarry yourself from what is in the novel and the exact way that the conversations occurred. Just because they existed in one form doesn't mean that it's going to be the best way to approach it in this other, far more condensed kind of medium. And so what I've found sometimes when I've been working on these things is if I've got two conversations between people, can I make them one conversation and accomplish the same stuff? So I don't have to change locations 3 times and then get them talking again. And so I think condensing and being creative about how to condense things is going to be your friend if you are a novelist who wants to then do your own adaptation. Is condensing. It's very good.
Yeah, I mean, you have to get to the point of the conversation. I mean, 3 conversations in a book is purely because you were spreading it out and showing how someone was impacted by the last discussion, or what do they mean when they said such and such. And I'm so frustrated by whatever. No, get to have your conversation and you get to the point. You can't have them talking for 10 minutes on screen, because then people are going to zone out and say, oh, whatever, So condensing, to be honest, I mean, as a screenwriter, having done this now, I think I've written 7 features and 6 shorts or something crazy like that. And so I've done it now, right? It's not like novel writing. It's not like short story writing. You cannot, you have to be, I hate to call it clipped, but that's how I feel when I come to writing, those, you have to clip everything. All this stuff I want to embellish, clip it, and once you understand that and truly internalize that, it becomes a little different. It becomes a little easier to stomach. I would want to introduce someone and describe their clothing and describe what they were thinking. And when they think, and that they're kicking a rock on the ground just to show that they're kind of bored with the moment. That's not, so will anyone watching at this point, if I were to describe it in that way. That all of that description is the costume designer putting on that t-shirt and pants that I wrote out, and the actor affecting the proper facial expression. That's how you have to kind of go with it.
Yeah, oftentimes the thing that you cut the most is the thing you think that you're not going to cut, which is dialogue. Dialogue gets cut because you can tell so much. An actor will tell you, I don't want to say that. I just want to look it. If I look into the camera and give you that reaction, you're going to get exactly what I would have said, instead of me saying it. And that's oftentimes the process of the actor that helps that out. So a lot of times, even if you have the dialogue in the final screenplay, it may not be said because the actor may interpret it and go, you know what, I can do this with a look. I don't need that. And the camera can pull in on the actor and make it sell it much better than any word you could ever write would.
And this can be true of seasoned professionals as well, because I took the masterclass, the Aaron Sorkin masterclass, and he told exactly a story like that he had like a 2-page monologue, and the actor was like, I can do that in a look, and he did, and it was better.
Well, I think about the actors that you enjoy watching. One that comes to mind who can do that is like Mads Mikkelsen. He was most recently, and probably my favorite role for him was Hannibal. And he would just look. And you're like, yes, oh no, don't kill this person. He had all of these reactions because of just his face. And he wasn't even making a true, dead on facial expression. Kind of cut his eyes a little or something. It was amazing. For me, when you're writing these screenplays and you put these bones together, and you envision your dream team, but to see it actually happen, like who said I want Mads Mikkelsen to see if he can do this? And what was the impression like when they finally saw it? Oh my gosh. So yeah, I just think that we learn that just by going. You can't determine immediately. You're never going to say, oh well, this 3 pages needs to go. You have to almost read it aloud and perform. I've done that before. Read my own dialogue aloud, and I'm like, no one says it like that. So then you have to cut it out. It's just trial and error.
Yep. So we did have a question on the live stream, or more of a statement, really, but saying that Edwin Downward said that he is leery of the idea of having something of his adapted because of the loss of creative control. It makes him want to run away from the whole concept. But he is here. He wants to learn more. And so we touched on this a little bit, I think, about control. But I think one thing that's really important for people coming from the novelist kind of world, and especially the self-publishing world, is that film and television is a hugely collaborative. And so the idea of control is you just kind of do have to throw it out the window at some point.
Well, unless you're planning on producing it yourself, entirely yourself. And that's it's viable. These days, especially, it's a viable option. You know, so you can hire a crew and write your screenplay, and that's what you shoot, right? It's possible. If you're submitting and trying to, you know, sell your screenplay to a studio, then I mean, what goes along with that is the fact that you're going to lose that creativity, or they create the input into the actual final product. I mean, and that's kind of understood as well. It has to be, I should say, understood as well. So you, at this point though, because what I just mentioned first this is a relatively new phenomenon. All this, I don't want to call it, we call it self-publishing, but that's not just self-production. You're writer, producer, screenwriter, you know, director, everything. You put makeup on, all of it. You can actually pull that off to some degree now, either yourself or hiring a crew and shooting it. And then it's a matter of distribution and trying to, which is its own animal. That's not don't let me make it sound like it's easy, because it's absolutely not. but none of this is. None of it is.
Right.
So losing that creative input is a reality. And so I don't mean to frighten anyone off, but I want to be clear about the fact that it is reality. It's unlike your novels. You write your novels, your editor looks at it and says, hey, change this, and you can say, no, I won't because of this. And, you know, if the publisher still wants to go with it, then they're going with it, right? And you've won that argument. Not so in screenplays. That you sell the screenplay, it's someone else's screenplay now. And, you know, it's the property of another group of people. So
here's what I'll say. I'll say two things about this, because I am both novelist. And what's the one thing everybody says about a book that turns into a movie? The book is always better than the movie. The book is always better than the movie. And number two, the other thing is that movie, if you let somebody else make it and they make it like crap, they're going to go to your book and try and see if it was the director or the movie, the studio that messed up the book. Or if you know, even if it's good, they'll go back and they'll get the book. Everybody goes and gets the book. Your book is not going to change. Your book is your book. Right. It's still there. It's not, unless somebody takes it and torches it and then takes the screenplay and writes a book out of the screenplay, which you could never let happen because you own the rights to those words. Right. You've got them copyrighted. Hopefully you've got it copyrighted. You know, but you've always written that book. The book's always going to be there. It's not going to affect you one way or the other. If anything, it's going to help you in the long run. So don't worry about things you can't control. Worry about the things you do control. Right. And you know, just be happy you have something that is there. And you never know. They may turn it into, it may win an Academy Award, you know, okay, let's not get crazy, but it may, it may win awards. It may go to a film festival and win awards. It may do, if you put it in the capable hands of a person who can do something like that, it may do that. And then you all benefit from that. So it's like, you know, you step out of, when you go skydiving, you step out of the plane to get that rush, right? It's that rush of all the excitement. I mean, every time I interview a novelist who's had their book adapted and they're on the red carpet, they're like, I would never have done this if I was a novelist. There's no red carpet for novelists, but there's a red carpet for a movie that gets made out of your novel, and you're the star because you're the one who wrote the original idea. So it's just silliness to think, you know, losing control. I get it. It's your baby. You don't want to see it destroyed, but who cares if it gets destroyed? You still have your baby. It's your baby. It's not right.
You still have a product that's separate from the screenplay. It's separate from the film. You have a product.
It's not unusual to dislike the final produced movie. I mean, I think Anne Rice didn't like something about Interview with a Vampire. Yeah. And Stephen King didn't like The Shining, the movie The Shining, which I'm like, that's like awesome. I love that movie.
You know, oh my God, like, it's so good.
Right. But he didn't like it. It wasn't true to what, you know,
I'll add this caveat too. Yeah. You get paid a shitload more for letting your book go and getting it made into a screenplay than you do and you don't have to worry. If you just let it go, you don't have to worry about producing or directing, because that is a job and it's a chore. And if you want to take that on because you want to take that on, that's a different thing. But if you're just doing it to have creative control, you don't know what you're getting into. This is it's not easy to make a movie, you know, and that's why there's hundreds of people who you need make a movie with, and you need that collaboration. But you get paid a lot. You get a lot of money for making a screenplay. And if you're not getting a lot of money, then don't let that guy take your screenplay, because that's bullshit. You know, there is laws that, you know, WGA is set up to specifically help you and protect you from predators and things like that for that. So, but you do make a lot more money if you just let it go. So.
And when you let it go and it does become even moderately successful, they come back to you for the next one.
Yeah, there you go.
You
can make more money that way.
Yeah,
you
then
know,
it's
pay me
more
bitch.
money when you hand it over to a professional.
You want the sequel? Pay me.
Right.
You know?
So there have also been a few questions that have come in about novelists who, you know, they recognize that writing a screenplay is a different animal than writing a novel. And so they are wondering about hiring someone to write the screenplay. And so I was wondering what you guys' thoughts are about, is that a good idea? How much should someone pay for something like that? What, you know, because I don't have any idea. I have no idea at all.
Well, here's my opinion, and then Joe can disagree if he wants, as can Lisa. So if you're anyone you can afford to hire is going to be a nobody, right? And then so now you have this script of your book written by a nobody, and you're not going to be able to pitch that any better than if a production company, actually bought the rights to your book and use one of they have go-to writers that they use all the time, use one of theirs. That's the right path. I'm not saying you couldn't do it the other way, but you could go through 10 screenwriters until you get a result that you like.
I totally agree. I totally agree 100% with that. And I also would add that if you're a self-published author, take your book to a screenwriting conference and just go to a pitch session and pitch your book to them, because what they're going to end up doing anyway is they're going to have, because if you have a nobody writing it, they're going to take that nobody and they're going to give it to me to script doctor it, and I'm going to get half the credit for something that, you know, that person started. They're basically just starting it, and then to get it produced and made, they're going to hire their own people, like John said, to make it happen and make it so that they can actually produce it and make it. So you might as well yourself go there and pitch it, and don't tell them, hey, this has to be in the book, or this part of the book has to be in the movie. Don't tell them any of that. Just pitch them your idea, tell them what your book is about, and let them come to you with, okay, so what should we do and how should we adapt it, kind of thing. And they may not even come to you, but they'll pay you. The way you get money for it is they pay you for the rights to own that book to produce into a screenplay. So, you know, that's the way to go.
Yeah, I think that's great advice.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is that if you wanted to learn how to write screenplays, then that's a different animal altogether. But
right.
If that's not what you're trying to, because if we haven't noticed, we've said there's so much formatting, there's so many rules, that if you don't want to learn to do that because you truly want to write screenplays, then don't do that. And hiring someone else, just like John said, you can't pay for the big guys. You know, you're going to pay for somebody who just knows how to write screenplays is not a name. So
yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious with the class you took, Allison, with Aaron Sorkin, how many people afterwards thought that he was now their best friend and they could message him and say, hey, I've got an idea for a screenplay. I guarantee you that's why they took that class to begin with.
It's probably, I'm sure it happens. He also comes off as being really nice.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything about him except, I'd watched his shows, but I didn't know about him as a person. And one thing that was really cool about Masterclass was that they stage a writer's room, and because he left the West Wing at some point, and so basically what they did in the writer's room was workshop what the next episode would have been after he left.
Yeah,
because he didn't watch it again after he left. He said it was way too hard. He was like, no, that person never would have said that, and so it was too hard, so he never did. But yeah, no, I mean, you have some buffers in place, at least with Masterclass. Like there's a
Yeah.
forum that he
Yeah.
may or may not
But
look
people
at.
don't realize that. They just think, I might have an opportunity to get Aaron Sorkin's ear,
Yeah.
which is the right attitude, but wrong approach.
Hmm.
There is a right way to do it. But
Hmm.
anyway.
Okay, I'm just looking quick over the other questions we got to see if there's something we haven't discussed yet. No, it looks like we've mostly covered the questions that have come up that were sent to me, but is there anything else that we haven't touched on yet that you feel like would be really good for people to know who are thinking about adaptation?
Well, if you're writing the screenplay or you're pitching your novel to somebody, know that you have rights. Know that you have. You go to the WGA and look at all the information that they give you. The WGA, for people who don't know, is the Writers Guild of America. That's the union that protects screenwriters from predatory losses and things of that nature.
Mhm.
So learn those things too, because I mean, any knowledge you can carry with you is going to help you in negotiation. It's going to help you in opportunity. So, and they also offer opportunity. You can go and get a directory of people who make and what they make and how they make it and what they're looking for. Those are things you can get from the WGA too. So
I'd like to encourage the people. So when Joe said that people always say the book is better than the movie. One solution to that is make your adaptation. You still have to have your voice in it, even though it's someone else's work. And so one of my favorite adaptations is Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. It's all Shakespeare's words, but it's a completely different vision and a completely different movie. That's what I would encourage you to do if you were so fortunate to have the rights to adapt someone's work. And especially if that someone was gone and you wound up with the rights with it, I would make it different, and then you don't have that comparison.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's a good insight. Let's see, what would I say? No, you go ahead.
No, I mean, we covered a lot here today on this one. I don't know. I guess more to reiterate that it's just writing a screenplay is a different animal. So be sure you really want to do it. You've written the novel or the short story or what have you. Be sure that's really what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I started out adapting the novels that I wrote mostly because they were the most fully formed stories that I already had. They had worlds, they had characters, they had relationships, they had conflict. And so for me it was experimenting with a new medium as much as anything else. And now I've very much been bitten by the screenwriting bug, and man, I should be working on my next novel. But I've found that it really clicked for me. It's a different way of doing it. I love reading screenplays and then seeing how that translates, because that's also a whole extra layer to it. And so, yeah, I very much am moving in a screenwriting direction, and I'm looking at my adaptations, these pilots that I'm writing based on my novels, as writing samples to try to get jobs, not with a mind to seeing my thing be made, because I have gotten to realize it on the page in a different format already. And so this just kind of goes back to what Joe was saying, that like the novel is still yours. You've still done it, however it was, like it still exists. It doesn't go away if it gets adapted and you're not in love with the adaptation.
Yeah, I've seen really bad movies that were adapted into screenplays, or really bad movies that were made from books and adapted from them. And I literally would go to the book just to see if that's where the source material was so bad to start with. So even if it's a terrible movie, and I might be weird, but like that, but if I think it's a terrible movie, I'll go read the book just to make sure that the book wasn't as terrible. But that's probably just me. But I wanted to mention too, going back to the conversation we had this morning, for anybody who didn't see it because it was so early in the morning for most of the people probably watching this right now, but go get yourself a screenwriter. Go get yourself the Screenwriter's Bible if you're going to adapt it into a screenplay, your novel into a screenplay, and also get yourself Final Draft,
which is a software.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we did touch a little bit on show don't tell in this morning, but that was another question that came in that I forgot to address on my list. And so the question is, I am sick of the show don't tell rule in novels, but yes, I understand why it's needed. But with script writing, isn't it the other way around? So they're asking, is it actually show more than tell? And so I wanted to throw that question out to you guys.
I
What do you feel about the
mean,
question?
literally, you could say that, but dialogue is your vehicle in screenwriting, so if you can't express whatever backstory you're trying to talk about, yeah, you can go back, but there's, if there's a secret back there that you want to say that, is hidden, and so you need to be able to have it. If you can move it forward with dialogue, then you're doing better than, trying to stage it in some other way. You need to be able to move from scene to scene using dialogue as that vehicle. And so show don't tell, I mean, that's more of a literal translation, I would say, in this discussion, but at the same time, they mean the same thing. You don't say the sky is gray. It's gray outside today. You show that it's a gray sky. That's the shot, right? And so as an author, you should know which sounds better for your voice. It's a rules. I don't want to take away from that rule because I also believe in that one. But not every rule do I believe in, but that one I do. So, but I mean, you know what sounds better, what looks better on screen. We've all seen movies before. This is not your first movie, and if it is, you need to go watch some movies, right? Because you need to know what you're trying to do. But again, dialogue is truly where you need to be showing or telling. Whichever way you'd like to take that message, you really should be considering dialogue as the vehicle.
I think it's important. It's really important to appreciate how powerful the human eye is, because there is a ton of information that we can take in from a fleeting image.
Yeah.
It can take 2 pages to describe.
Yeah.
And so even though you're using fewer words in a screenplay, there needs to be this visual aspect. Because novels are about what people think, plays are about what people say, and screenplays are about what people do.
Yep.
And we can just so much information with our eyes, but you still have to be economical about how you put it on the page. Because I had for Riffmaker, for this adaptation I've been working on, I had this very clear vision, even of I wanted the camera to slowly zoom out and reveal more and more, because I had seen something like this in a film before, and it gave you the idea of the verticality. And I ran it by my critique group, and I was like, yeah, so there's this vertical shantytown, blah, 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 blah. And they're like, vertical shantytown, that's all the more you need to say. You don't need the 4 other sentences describing what a vertical shantytown looks like. And so they really helped me zero in on the most economical way to express what you would see.
It also winds up as the most economical way once it's on the screen. So it's making me think of the first taking of Pelham 1, 2, 3. So that book came out in early 70s. The movie came out in 74. The later one of John Travolta is a good movie too. So I'm not someone who criticizes reboots all the time. But in that first one in 1974, it's just the cough, right? And so the cough appears in the movie 4 times, I think, and that whole movie is hinged on that cough. That lasts 1 second every time.
Yeah.
Martin Balsam coughs.
Yeah, there's little tricks and little things you can do to kind of enhance what you're trying to say or do, like vertical city. That's pretty inventive.
Yeah.
But things like that. I mean, you learn that as you go, but it's like the less is more in a lot of cases. Like I said, you could probably write a 2-page dialogue scene for an actor. Actor can cut it into 2 words or cut it into no words, and what have you done really? they're going to show you how to tell it, basically, I guess, But yeah, I just, I think everything. The one thing you have to learn about screenwriting is that it's visual. I mean, you're blueprinting what is going to be seen, and so you have to show people how to do that. I mean, that's just the basics of it. So
I found this very strange tension as I'm writing things. Dreaded unfilmable, the thing that you put in that cannot be seen, but might enhance the emotional reaction that the reader has. So where you're talking about tone, that because like you're not supposed to drop in particular songs that you want in your score, but if you want them to know like this is hella ominous, like like sometimes you actually do want to drop these unfilmables in. And I've noticed a stark difference because I read a lot of pilots rather than films. And so pilots actually have a lot more unfilmables than movies do. And I think to some extent, there is also just this feeling that you want to drop in little hints about what will come later in the series. Like I read the pilot for The Boys lately, and there was straight up 2 sentences of unfilmable, but it was like, oh, but you're telling me that I need to notice this detail because it would be intriguing if it's done correctly. So there is this kind of weird tension though between the unfilmables and the showing as much as you can. You're also not supposed to give the actor every single gesture that they're supposed to do as well. So again, the economy of like, but what's the one, like which eye roll is the most important that you actually need to put in there, even if they're constantly eye rolling? What do you actually put on the page? Is a really interesting tension.
The unfilmables you're talking about, not the actor ones, but the ones you were talking about before. You're reading a lot of pilots, and I don't want to say most of the time, but the majority of the time, the pilot in the last episode's written by the showrunner. And then if there's 8 in the room, the other ones are working on a rotating basis on the other ones. And so there are going to be more unfilmables when the showrunner is writing that script, because he's the showrunner of that one. So that's why you're seeing more of them. If you were to go and of all those pilots that you read, if you went and gone and found episode 5 of those, I would say you wouldn't see as many.
But I think that speaks a lot to the collaboration effort that we were talking about before. When we're writing these screenplays, a lot of times what we want to hope is that what we wrote is going to be the thing that's filmed. But we know that that's not necessarily the case. So if you go in with the mindset of, okay, I want to have confidence that they can light this scene properly. I want to have confidence that this actor has enough chops to be able to pull off this expression, and me not write every daggone detail of it down and cue them. And, I want to make, all the camera shots that you're not supposed to ever call out. I want to make sure, I want to feel like I don't have to do that. If you go in with that confidence that your piece is going to be taken by a professional team and can, produce quality work at the end, then you don't necessarily feel compelled to write each and every direction. Now, that's not to say that you don't write any. You can't write a lot, right? But if you feel compelled to write 1 or 2, that's not going to bury it for you in most cases. But you can't. I mean, you can't just. There's no need to direct everybody. The actors are coming to this with a specific set of what is that? What did Liam Neeson say in that movie? He said, a particular set of skills. What's that line? I would love to have used it. I can't even use it now. But anyway, you have a particular set of skills to come into this, into the production for any of these jobs, and you have got to have the confidence that they know what they're doing and can pull off the script. So no, you're not supposed to cue a whole lot.
Yeah.
Well, you do it the way that Phoebe did it. You put vertical, or you put something, you put an action verb in there, and that. And anybody would have said vertical. Obviously, we're looking at
that it's a wide shot.
You get it, but you can put things in there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to pay attention to it either.
Right.
So
yeah.
So or they're going to hire the actor you want to hire. They may be best friends with Ben Affleck, and you may hate Ben Affleck, but guess what? Ben Affleck's doing that movie because that director knows that he's got something juicy, and he wants Ben Affleck to do it because he wants Ben Affleck to be at his son's bar mitzvah, kind of thing. So this is the inner workings of Hollywood that just drives people nuts. This is what happens. You get favors done and things done, and you have no control over any of that. No matter how much control you think you have, you never have enough control.
No.
All right, well, fantastic. We have blown right through our hour once again. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for joining me on our panel today. If you each want to just, again, remind people your name, where they can find you, if they want to connect with you online.
I'm Elmarie Wood. You can find me at elmariewood.com or on Facebook at facebook.com/elmariewood or on Twitter at elmariewood1.
I'm Jon Myers. You can, if you go to Filmic the page on Facebook, Twitter, and Insta, and then there's also johnmyerscripts.com, which will send you to Filmic the page, and that's the best way to say that. And I wanted to correct something that I said in the last panel, not correct something, but give more detail. So I told you about the BFA program at Western Kentucky University, and I gave you the long-about way to get there. If you just go to wkufilm.com, you'll see the whole film school, and that's the easiest way to get there.
I'm Joe Compton. You can find me on Facebook at Joe Compton or Joe Dream. My Twitter is JoeDream73, and that's me personally. And then I run the online network called Go Indie Now, so you can go there, and facebook.com/Go Indie Now, Go Indie Now on YouTube, Go Indie Now on Twitch. If you look up Go Indie Now, other than Twitter, because some jerk bought Go Indie Now and wanted $75,000 for it. Other than Twitter, I'm on Go Indie Now everywhere else. So.
Wow. All right. Well, and I was Allison Weaverdick / Phoebe Darqueling, depending on when you're talking to me. So you can find me on phoebedarqueling.com. To see my fiction kind of things. And thank you everybody so much for coming out for the panel today, and for the people who saw us on the live stream. You guys hang around. I'm going to go ahead and end the live stream, and have a wonderful rest of LitCon, everybody.
Bye, everybody.